Hi, everybody, and welcome to the college webinar with Karen Fong Donahue from Rugger's Edge. Karen has a presentation for us tonight about the college acceptance program and specifically catered to our college webinar and combine that's coming up. So I'll hand straight over to Karen. And good evening, Karen. How are you?
Good, good. So before I kind of dive into my presentation, first of all, I want to thank Rugby New Jersey, for hosting these webinars for all the families that are out there. This is a great way for me to, share the information, when maybe it's not as feasible for me to travel. So this is great. I'm really happy for this opportunity, and thank you to all the families that are taking some time this evening to learn about the process. And just a little bit of housekeeping, just so, as we go through the presentation, if you do have questions, I believe there's going to be, there should be a way for you to, type in questions, and then Pat will be able to moderate those for me, and we can answer those at the end. So I do know we're going to cover a lot of information. So if you, maybe have a thought, hang on to it. Maybe I'll cover it in the next slide, and we'll just kind of go from there. So, all right.
Karen, I think everybody, so on the right-hand side of the window in YouTube, you'll see there's a live chat. I'm gonna type hi into that now. So if everybody wants to ask a question, you can ask it in the live chat, and I'll ask Karen directly. So if Karen goes by something, you can type a question in there, and I'll catch up to them at the very end. All right, Karen, let's get going. I'll start the presentation.
All right. Yay, I can see myself.
Okay.
All right, so obviously this evening, the title of the presentation, we're going to talk about how to make the most of your rugby combine. We've got a really big, event coming up in the New Jersey area. So we can go to the next slide. And, kind of before I jump into that, just some special thanks. So I already talked about Rugby New Jersey, great, organization out there that's really helping to develop rugby with the youth out in that area. I want to give a shout out to Arbor Bridge. They're my preferred test prep company. They're based out of California, but they do work with almost all of my students, both domestically and abroad. They do some wonderful work, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on, on testing information, but certainly I think if you are in the process of thinking about, what tests you're going to take, which tests should you take, Arbor Bridge is a great resource. They offer a free diagnostic testing, a free lesson for you to check it out, see if it's a good fit. So I really would urge anyone out there to check that out. Also, shout out to Atavis. They do lots of rugby programming, coaching clinics, as well as camps all around the country, as well as rugby athletic, and also Skins, which is my preferred compression wear. And actually, as a supporter of Rugger's Edge, if you are ever interested in buying skins, and recovery skins are my go-to after a long day of rugby, you can actually order them from us at Rugger's Edge for 25% off the retail price. So it's a really great deal. So definitely just talk to me if you're interested in that. All right, next slide. So a little bit about me. I'm a professional college consultant. As you can see there, I'm not going to read through everything, but definitely been in the rugby community for a very long time. The other thing that I do, and some of you may have met me in the past on the field, I've been a referee as well. So I'm a World Rugby educator. I've been doing referee certifications for the last year. You can see there, I have a daughter, she's 2 years old, and that was us at Rugger Fest last year. So it's really great to kind of add her to the family business. My husband also plays rugby, so we certainly hope that she's gonna end up being a rugger as well. I'm based in Colorado, and I do work with families worldwide. So I work with families as far away as, I had a family last year in Germany, Australia, New Zealand, and obviously domestically. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So what we do, so just really quickly, our bread and butter, the thing that we do and we do really well is we work with families one-on-one. So the personalized advising is really what we do and where we provide the most value. So helping families through this entire process. Of course, a big part of our mission is just to educate. So we do these group, seminars, just like we're doing here, either in person or webinar style. And then, we also do lots of presentations to large groups, you know, so like New Jersey Rugby, SoCal, Illinois, things like that. We're really proud of where all of our students have gone on to continue to, you know, play in their rugby career. So those are just some examples of places that our students have gone into. Right now, we have about an 80% success rate of placing our students at either their number 1, 2, or 3 choice, and we're really excited about that. Okay. Next slide. So in case you didn't know, the Rugby New Jersey College Rugby Combine and Fair is coming up on the 25th. It's from 10 a.m. to 3. There's some more details. It's all listed on the Rugby New Jersey website, and they do ask for you to be registered by the 15th. That just helps, you know, I would assume. I'm sure Packet Talk, it just really helps to understand what the there's some more details. All right, so we'll go to the next slide. And this is our agenda. We're going to kind of go through some college rugby basics. So even if you've heard me talk before, I always think it's a good idea to really think about, you know, what does the college rugby landscape really look like and how does it apply to you and also your needs? What does rugby scholarship look like? You know, what it is, what it isn't. And then we're going to talk about the rugby combine. You know, what are some do's and what are some don'ts? You know, I know some, you know, families, this might be the first time you're engaging in something like that. So I do know there's some nerves. So I'm going to do my best to give you, you know, a little bit of some practical things you can apply for the day. And then we'll leave plenty of time at the end to do question and answer. All right, so here we go. These are the current list of colleges that have confirmed to be in attendance. And, you know, this is, you know, really for you to get a sense of how many colleges, and this is just a very small handful actually of all the colleges in the country that are going to be coming to this event. Really excited to meet, you know, all of the, you know, great student athletes that are in the area. And I think this is a testament to really the growth of, you know, college rugby. So this is just for you to kind of, we'll come back to the slide, but I do want to kind of give you a sense of what colleges are going to be there. You can see, if you know anything about colleges, that's a big variety of large colleges, small colleges, medium. You've got some varsity programs in there, club varsity. So what colleges are going to be there, you can. All right, so we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so college rugby landscape. This is one of the biggest, I think, misconceptions when I work with families is really the sheer number of teams that are available to players. You know, I think, you know, often players might come to me and they're going to say, you know, can I play in college? You know, what are the opportunities? And this is it right here. As of January 2018, you know, for the men, there's almost 600 teams you could choose from, you know, and for the women, you know, almost 400. And that's great. I think the differences are going to come from, you know, whether or not you want to play for certain divisions or how serious of a program you're going to look for. But I think first and foremost, I want, you know, every single player that's out there, any family, if they're thinking about it, if the first question is, can my son or daughter play in college? Absolutely, without a doubt, I'm going to tell you yes. Every single, you know, high school player, even if you've only had one season under your belt, I would tell you without a doubt, you can play college rugby. You know, historically, most, you know, college teams were made up of players that picked it up in college, you know, myself included. I picked it up in college. So it only is going to help grow programs the more high school players that we have that do join these teams. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. So here are just some examples of college teams, because I think there's always some confusion about what really, you know, what teams are within these divisions. So this is just going to give you a little bit of some clarity here. So for example, and by the way, these are the teams that are listed here are those that were either the champion or at least were in the championship game for last year's national championship within these divisions. So men's D1A, we had St. Mary's and also Life. Men's D1 AA, we had Notre Dame College out of Ohio against UC Davis, my alma mater. Pat, sorry, are you on mute?
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay. I can hear some stuff in the background.
Okay, I'll mute. I have to switch back to, hang on one second and I'll mute myself. Can I? Sorry,
I don't know if that's just, okay. So men's Division II, we had University of Minnesota Duluth, and then we also had Furman University, great, wonderful varsity program there in South Carolina. And then on the men's, NSCRO, National Small College Rugby Organization, Claremont Colleges out of California, and then Tufts University out of Massachusetts. And then for the women, you can already see there's a little bit of difference, just even in the way that we categorize things. But the idea from USA Rugby is women's elite is theoretically kind of on the same level as a men's D1A. And then women's D1 is essentially a men's D1AA and then D2 and NSCRO. So those should all kind of follow the same path. Now, the thing that I really kind of point out is that every single team within these divisions can always change. And the main thing is, with the exception of a few NCAA teams, which we'll get to in a later slide, all of these programs, I would say 90%, 95% of all these teams, there's nothing to do with NCAA. So it's all overseen by USA Rugby. So teams can switch division to division, year to year, depending on, what their needs are, what the roster looks like, what their, history looks like. If they've been winning Division II 5 years in a row, maybe it's time to move on up. So, and actually you'll see UC Davis on the men's D1AA, this is their first year they've moved up to D1A. So that's the thing about, when I work with a family, I would advise, be knowledgeable about the divisions, but I don't know that I'd necessarily tell you to focus your decisions completely on, I only want to play Division I, because chances are it's going to change. Something that I used to have on the side would be examples of varsity cup teams. Those would include, Cal, Dartmouth, UCLA, Arizona State. And actually, as of this year, the varsity cup is no longer. So again, college rugby in the US, it's still very much in its infancy. So we have to kind of stay on our toes, be flexible, and understand that things are just going to continue to change. That is what is very exciting about college rugby. But I do understand from a family standpoint, it can be a little bit confusing. So we're going to keep going, and I want to kind of dive a little bit deeper into what college looks like. So again, men's rugby, non-NCAA, the way that the season is set up, and I think this is interesting for especially you guys on the East Coast, if you're joining us from the East Coast, the season might actually be different. So typically, depending on, whatever division you're in, you're going to play a regular season. So D1A, D1AA, et cetera. And then you will choose to opt into a certain level of championships. So you can either do a D1A national championship, or if you're going to go for an NSCRO championship, or, and again, we'll split that up into 15s and 7s. So you'll have a 15s national championship and you'll have a 7s national championship. So the bottom line here, number one, multiple national championships. So if you're sitting here thinking, I want to play for a national championship team, there's various ways you can do that. You really can play for very, very competitive teams, just, maybe in different divisions. The thing I was going to point out about the scheduling is typically on the East Coast, obviously because of weather, the schedule is going to be different. So a lot of teams will end up doing only a fall season. So what you'll end up seeing if you kind of keep up with the rugby media and that sort of thing, you'll have what's called a fall championship, right? Or a fall champion. And then in the spring, you'll have someone, typically on a West Coast team will have a spring champion. And then the national championship is basically between the spring and the fall champion. So, I think something to keep in mind there is I certainly believe that West Coast teams many times are at an advantage because they do play a lot more rugby. They can play rugby year round. Teams I know in California, you can, really play rugby through the summer as a long preseason, through the fall, through the spring. So you're just going to get a lot of reps in. I think on the East Coast, it's a little more difficult. And what you'll end up seeing is sometimes the style of game is going to be a little bit different too. If you're in an area where weather is bad, sometimes you're going to see maybe play is going to stay more with forwards versus backs, things like that. So you will see some differences among the style of games, depending on where you're playing, in the US. All right, we'll go to the next slide. All right, so NCAA women's rugby, this is kind of the new thing. And I say new because it really, every single year I'm shocked by how much change is going on. And that's exciting. I think for the women, it's been, rugby's been an emerging NCAA sport for many years. So I think the push to continue to, bring rugby into the forefront, make it a mainstream sport, it's definitely there. We have a lot of support. As you can see here, it is split up, by these divisions. There's a Division 1, Division 2, and Division 3, and this is NCAA. So this, again, nothing to do with that USA Rugby model. You can see here at the very bottom, I made a note that it's very dynamic and it changes every year, mainly because we have new, kind of additions. So Queen's University out of Charlotte is a new one. They're in Division 2. Colby Sawyer is another new one that's added in Division 3. 2 years ago, University of New England, Malloy, these are all new programs. And it's great, to see that these teams are really starting to, figure it out that rugby is a great sport and they want to add it to their colleges. So we're excited to see, how this is going to pan out in the next, year, next couple months, that sort of thing. I did highlight Quinnipiac there as well because they won the NCAA National Championship again this last year. They're a wonderful program. So just definitely want to highlight, their accomplishments there. All right, we'll go to the next slide. Oh, actually, sorry, go back one if you can, Pat. So quick note, if we do have some young women that are interested in these specific schools, or if you're considering them, one of the differences about recruitment for these programs versus the others is with these programs, because they're NCAA, you will have to follow the NCAA protocol, meaning where if you're interested in, some other program, like a Penn State or, UCLA or something like that, you wouldn't have to deal with the NCAA Eligibility Center, but with these programs, you do. So if you are a junior and you're thinking about these programs, you do have to go, you Google NCAA Eligibility Center, you have to create an account, you have to have an NCAA number, you have to submit lots of information, whether or not you've met their core requirements and testing and things like that. So they just hold their athletes in terms of the recruiting process to a different standard. So you just have to be aware of that. Also on the back end, from the coach's standpoint, they also are held to a different standard. So if you are interested in one of these programs and you're like, I've been emailing the coach, she hasn't gotten back to me. Chances are, if they're NCAA, there's a reason for that. They're not allowed to contact you till after July 1st of your start of your junior year. So you have to be a current junior for them to talk to you. So if you are a freshman or sophomore, don't fret if you're not hearing back from them. It's not that they're not interested. It's still a good idea to be in touch, but because of NCAA rules, that's the reason why they can't reach out to you. Okay. All right. Perfect. All right. Thanks, Pat. So we'll go to the next one. So this is where I really want to spend a little more time, is just defining these, because I've already kind of thrown out those terms varsity, varsity club, and club a few times. So I want to define these for you a little bit. So as you're, starting to research these colleges, when you're walking around that combine and that fair and you're meeting, programs, something for you to kind of know ahead of time is this program varsity? Is it varsity, club, or is it club? It doesn't mean one is better. I just think it's good for you to know what's kind of, included in that package, right? So you can see here just on this graph, I would say the majority, of programs that are here in the US, they're club. And by club, I mean, they're typically kind of student run, student driven. So what you're going to end up seeing is, student funded. So things like students are going to pay dues. They're going to be, doing fundraising. You'll have alumni that are going to donate. Typically you might have a volunteer coach, or you're going to have coaches that, maybe get a little bit of a stipend. And you're going to kind of see a little bit of lack of top-down mentality. And when I say that, it means if a program decides we're going to train 4 days a week, that's kind of among the students to decide this is the type of program we want. Versus on the flip side, if we go all the way over to the red, to varsity, typically those are going to be top down. So there's a head coach, a paid head coach who's on staff, who makes those decisions, who's going to say, look, this is the program I want to run. I want, trainings 5 days a week. We have to have strength and conditioning. This is the schedule we're going to play. There's a lot more of, kind of the coach at the very top organizing everything, versus on the club side, it's more maybe student run. And then here you have in the middle, you have varsity club. And basically varsity club are those teams that are going to straddle both worlds a little bit. So they're going to be a little bit varsity and they're going to be a little bit club. So a good example would be, say, University of Arizona, their varsity club, where, you know, they have a full-time head coach. They have access to, you know, varsity facilities. They have funding for travel. You know, they have just a lot more of those amenities you know, kind of expect from a varsity program. However, you know, a lot of it is still, you know, kind of club based. So you're not going to get things like, you know, maybe early registration for classes or something like that. The other thing you're going to keep in mind is, from a varsity angle, typically varsity programs, you know, because they are funded, they're administratively supported, you're going to get more things like scholarships. You're going to get things like admission support, you know, being able to help a student get into a school that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise. And then as well as obviously staffing, medical care. I think that's a big one too. Varsity clubs tend to, you know, because it's built into the program, you will have teams that have access to, you know, full-time strength and conditioning, trainers at every practice and at away games and home games, things like that. So those are questions as you're, you know, kind of exploring the colleges at the Combine, you know, you might want to ask, or, you know, do you consider yourself, yourself a club? Are you a varsity club, or are you a varsity program? What does that entail? So the more educated I think students and families can be about the process, the easier this will be. If you're going into this completely blind, you're going to start hearing things and you'll get really confused, because I understand this can be confusing. So I do want to make sure you guys understand this part. Okay, we'll go on to the next one. So this is another piece of the puzzle. And I think when I work with families, this is probably the piece that we spend a little bit more time talking about. And this is more about fit. You know, it's my philosophy, certainly, that players, when they go off to college and they decide to play for a rugby program, you know, deciding to be a part of college athletics isn't, something to just sniff about, right? I think if you're, you know, for example, if you're going to go for a high performance program, scale of 1 to 10, we're at a 9 or a 10, you know, you're really committing a lot of time to rugby. And so, you know, we're looking at anywhere from 25, 30 hours a week just on rugby kind of stuff, right? So practices, meetings, trainings, study halls, film review, rehab, recovery days, preseason, getting ready for 15s and 7s. I mean, all of that gets rolled into one where, you know, I might sit down with a player and say, okay, you're telling me you want high performance, but you're also telling me you're going to, let's say, declare a very difficult major. You also plan to work a job. You also want to be part of Greek life and be in a fraternity. How are we going to balance these things? So high performance, I think, is a great fit for some students. And I think for others, it's not such a great fit. So this is that part where we really, you know, want students to think about in a year, in 2 years, when they're in college, what does that college experience look like? And if you're like, oh, you know, I love rugby, but I don't really want it to be my whole life, then maybe high performance isn't the way we're going to go. Typical high performance programs that I would suggest you look into would be, you know, a lot of varsity programs. So, you know, on the men's side, we're looking at Cal, we're looking at, Lindenwood, we're looking at Arkansas State, we're looking at Notre Dame College, American International. Some of those programs are going to be really more on the high performance end. As we kind of move down the scale a little bit, I would, really consider some teams that are competitive. I would say the majority of players that are working with me, we're looking at competitive to high performance programs. And what I mean by this is, you're looking at this balance of being competitive, probably training anywhere from 3 to 4 days a week, but it's not going to overtake your life. So, you might have 3 practices a week. You might have 2, captain's trainings. You might have, like a rehab day on Sunday, things like that. So a Clemson would be a good example, University of Michigan, Indiana. Those would all be examples of competitive programs that just aren't necessarily super high performance. We're looking at maybe 20 to 25 hours hours a week of dedicating yourself to rugby. And then on the far end, anywhere from 1 to 5, we have social teams. And actually, I would say a huge majority of rugby in the US is still social. And by social, I don't mean this to be negative. I think it's good to know this is really our roots, right? College rugby is kind of based on social rugby, where you have lots of, guys and gals, and they're picking up rugby. It might be their first time ever, being on a rugby field. So you get lots of people that have never played the sport. They have a lot of fun with it. You have some athletes that are on there, but I think certainly the rugby IQ may not be there. Practicing twice a week, game on Saturday, it's a lot of fun, but probably not the most structured program that, you can see. Often I see with social programs, maybe a player coach, you might get, maybe a smaller roster size, things like that. So these are all questions as you're exploring these programs. You can ask some questions. How many players do you typically have on a team? What does your daily week schedule look like? That's going to give you a sense of where this team is. Something that I often do too as well is if I can't really figure it out based on, maybe their scheduling, I will watch games online. The nice thing about the day and age we're in now is you can see everything. Everything from Flow Rugby, which is streaming games, to a lot of the national championships are streamed by USA Rugby. They're still available to watch. If you have a team you're interested in, I would say go ahead and, prior to, the combine, watch a game. I think it's pretty easy to see if you were to watch a high performance game, compare it to another team that's, competitive, and compare it to someone else who's social, it can get pretty clear what level they are. And then also for yourself to think about, could I play on that team? Would I have a chance to suit up and roster? I think the other thing for me that I always think about with a player is, do you want to train 15, 20, 30 hours a week and then not play on Saturday? For me, I was a competitor. I wanted to play. I would not have wanted to train and not get a chance to get out there on the pitch. So I think for some players, you might look at maybe a lower division, so that you can play. That's why we're here. That's why we're talking about rugby, is people want to compete. They want to get out on the field, score tries, play with their friends. So it's not that much fun to ride the bench. So as you're kind of thinking about what level is a good fit for you, I want you to think about, where am I really going to get the experience I want out of, college rugby? Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So what can rugby do for you? And this is a common question. And if you can go to the next thing. So scholarships, right? I think that's always a really, really big question. College, as everybody knows, is just getting more and more expensive each year. So, can rugby help? And yes, it definitely can. Okay. So if we talk about the different types of scholarships that are offered, the first thing I'm going to talk about is rugby scholarships. So these are scholarships that are based off of strictly your athletic talent. You're an amazing, lock, and you're 6'7", and you've been playing in all these regional top teams, and every single team, college team, would want you on their team. They might go ahead, if they have the ability to offer athletic scholarship, they will offer you a rugby scholarship. Now, I really want to make this clear. Zero programs in the US can give you a full ride for rugby. Okay, so when you hear the question, or when you hear, where can we go and get a full ride for rugby? I'm going to flat out tell you there's nowhere. Okay, so if that's why you're playing the sport, this is probably the wrong sport for you. But what I want you to know is there are certainly many players I know who are going to college essentially on a free ride. But the way we do that is by stacking scholarships. So if Pat can kind of go to the next two, you can hit one more. There's two other ways you're going to get money. The way you're going to get the most money is merit scholarships. So merit scholarships is really based on a couple things. Merit is obviously, your grades. So GPA. We're looking at grades 9 through 11 typically. So cumulative GPA, we're looking at test scores, so ACT, SAT. And we're also looking at things like character and leadership. So those extra things that you're doing. Are you the editor of your paper? Are you the captain of your team? Are you in charge, the president of your student body? Things like that all get rolled in and get accounted for from every single college from merit scholarships. And the most money you're ever going to see is from merit scholarships. Ideally, what we can do is stack 1, 2, or 3 of these scholarships together. The last scholarship you're going to see there, and has $1 sign, because typically they're not very big, but you want to add on as much as possible, right? So alternate scholarships will include everything from alumni scholarships. So you might have a team that has a great alumni group that's put together, a scholarship. So for example, University of Wyoming just announced they have 2, I think, $1,600 scholarships for incoming girls for their women's rugby program. So that's great. That came from a family that decided to donate. So those alternate scholarships can be paired with a merit scholarship or also with a rugby scholarship. So I think if this is a big factor, if this is a big piece of your college search, is where can we go where we're going to get the most money discounted from our total cost, you're probably going to start at a list with schools that at least offer some sort of rugby scholarship, or you're looking at schools where your student, their academic profile is going to be stronger than what is typical from that school. That is really where you're going to see the most merit scholarship. Now, if Pat hits the next slide, the last thing that rugby can do for you is to apply admission support. And I think this is always the really exciting part about what I do and where I've seen the most change. So in the last 5 years, it used to go from, 2 colleges that could really help a student to now we've got, 20, 25 colleges that can do that. So there's 2 different ways that colleges can help you. So the first is admission influence. So this is this is typically a varsity team where, a rugby program is so valued on campus, they can actually go to admissions and say, look, these are our 5, these are our 10, these are our 15 students. We want admitted. And, pretty much as long as that, student has met some minimum requirements, they are admitted. The other way you're going to look at it is, some programs are going to have what's called input. And that means, they can't formally offer you a spot on the team, but they can advocate for you. They can go ahead and say, look, we're going to flag your application for admission. So like University of South Carolina would be a good example of a team that, has a great relationship with admissions, that they can go ahead and talk to them and say, look, we've met with these players. We think they'd be great for the school. Can they flag you for admission? So, and especially when we start seeing some schools that are, diving into the, sub 10% acceptance rate, anything you can have in your favor, especially having a coach on campus fight for you, that's a really big deal. So again, admission influence and then also admission input. So when you're at the fair and you're talking to coaches, you can ask these questions. Do you offer any admission influence? If so, what do you need from me that I can gain your support? Do you have admission input? I mean, those are all things that are going to help you in the process. So it's helpful for you to kind of understand the 2 different ways that these programs can help. Okay, we'll go to the next one. All right, so Rugby Combine do's and don'ts. Okay, so this is going to be fun because I've been to a few combines in the past, and there are definitely some things that, for those of us who've been to them before, especially coaches and previous players, you're going to see some of these come up. So hopefully, if we go over these now, we're going to avoid some of the pitfalls. So okay, well, let's go to the next slide. So do's. All right, so keep going. You might have to hit okay. So yeah, you can just go back 1. Okay, perfect. So combine do's. Number 1, be prepared. So we've already kind of talked a little bit about, things that you can already start thinking about and prepare. So research. I'm going to pull up again the slide of, later on at the end of this presentation, who's coming. And it's going to be in your best interest. There's a lot of them, right? So prior to going to the combine, do some research. You're probably not going to be able to go around to every single table in the limited time you have. So you want to make sure, hey, look, if I only have, whatever it is, an hour and a half, what are the top 5 colleges you for sure want to go see? Do some research ahead of time. Don't go up to a coach and say, So do you guys have psychology on campus? When that's something you easily could look up on your own. So you want to be able to ask questions if you've got a coach there, things you can't find online. Okay, don't waste a coach's time. Don't waste an admissions rep's time with stuff you can quickly Google, find on their website, look in a brochure, right? So you want to find out some things, what division do you guys play in? Well, could you have found that out on the team's website, on their Facebook page, things like that. So the more you prepare, the easier your day is going to go. And also it's going to show the coaches you took some time, to kind of look into that. Number 2, dress appropriately. So these are 2 pictures of, some teams that, in basically athletic gear. I know it's a combine, so you're going to be doing some movement, getting athletic, things like that. So we certainly don't expect you to show up in a suit and tie, but we do want you to look neat. So that's what I would recommend. We don't want you showing up and, basically making it seem like you didn't care enough to present yourself in a nice way. I do know that, the girls are going to be showing up earlier in the day. So, because they're not going right into the athletic stuff, certainly if you have some, you have more flexibility to show up maybe in nicer apparel and then changing into your athletic gear, but that's really up to you. I think that picture right there of the girls team, if you showed up like that, nice, neat tracksuit, I think that'd be perfectly acceptable, okay? Number 3, combine dues, ask questions, right? And yeah, so the next slide, I'll talk about some good questions, but the thing I don't want is for you to show up and expect these coaches to talk at you the whole time. Okay, so the point here is for you, as much as some of the coaches are going to be really judging you, right? And seeing if you're a good fit for the program, a big part of why a fair is important and meeting these coaches and reps is important is really for you to be doing the research and seeing if this is a good fit for you, right? So you're asking questions about, what does the school look like? What is the atmosphere like? Because you want to see if it's a good fit for you too. And then last piece, combine dues, you want to follow up. So as much as possible, if you can, if you have your phone or you have a notepad, jot down these coaches' information, jot down their emails, and afterwards send a nice email. Dear Coach so-and-so, it was so nice to meet you at the combine today. I'm really excited, about the prospect of playing for you. I'd love some more information, et cetera, et cetera. So following up is great. Just meeting someone briefly at a fair and expecting they're going to come help you and recruit you, it just doesn't happen that way. So definitely the follow-up is going to be a really big piece of the puzzle. Okay, so next slide. Questions to ask. Here are some examples, okay? And again, you can pick whatever you want, but I think these are some good ones to think about. And, I think it's dependent on who is actually manning the table, if it's a college coach or if it's a player. I'm not sure who's going to be at each table. So here are just some ideas. So for a college coach, I think it's good to ask, are there admission requirements for an athlete, or maybe are they different from a non-athlete? This is kind of a slightly different way of asking whether or not there's admission support, for athletes. What types of off-season activities are expected? This is something for you to keep in mind. Again, is this high performance? Is this, competitive? Is this social? What does that schedule look like? And then again, what does a typical day in the life of a player look like at your school? And then for current and alumni players, something I always find really interesting to find out is, how many classes, did you have, or, have you been taught by a professor or a teacher's assistant? This goes back to, again, fit, so what kind of a college atmosphere are you looking for? And what does your learning style look like? What do students do on the weekends? What are some favorite traditions on campus? This is going to give you a little bit more of that insider knowledge about a campus that you won't necessarily know just from, a website or a book or something. And you've got someone in front of you who's on campus all the time. Who better to ask than those people? So just kind of hear it straight from the horse's mouth. Yeah, so those are just some examples, and there's some more that I can send you, and I'll send some out to Pat as well if we want to post it on the Rugby New Jersey site. Okay, we'll go to the next one. So combine don'ts. I know some of it is a little repetitive, but number 1, don't be late. So if you've never been to this facility where the combine is, take some time the night before, make sure if you're driving yourself, that you've, done a Google map, or you know exactly how long it's going to take you. If someone's driving you, make sure you know how long it's going to take you door to door, you know, to park, you know, all those sorts of things, you know, and also account for, you know, what if there's an accident? What if there's weather? The last thing you want to do is show up late. Okay, so this is something where, you know, I forget who told me this, but sometime when I was a player, you know, if you're on time, you're late. So I would, you know, really recommend you're there 15 minutes early. Okay. Don't get nervous. So this is, you know, my philosophy about, you know, college and the college planning process is this should be fun. This is exciting. You're trying on different colleges. You're trying to see if it's a good fit. Don't put so much pressure on yourself. It really, you know, when you're there and you're doing rugby stuff, you know what? You know how to play rugby. So have fun, play rugby, be yourself, but be your best self. That's the way I would look at it. So don't be unprofessional. So the appearance and communication, those are two examples of ways I have seen students show up at combines and recruit fairs. Do not be like these two. Show up in, you know, kind of that previous slide. You want you look nice and neat and professional, and also in communication. So, you know, this is a time where prior to the combine, you know, if you have never done an interview, if you've never talked to someone like a college coach, you might have to practice. So this is something, you know, maybe with mom or dad, even though it feels silly, and I've done these mock interviews, you have to pretend. You have to walk in, shake someone's hand. Hi, my name is Susie Smith. I'm a junior at so-and-so high school. I'd love to learn more about your, you know, program. Look them in the eyes, smile, you know, be professional. You know, these coaches are spending their time to be there with you. They're excited to meet you. So, you know, just kind of have fun with it, be professional, and certainly, you know, speak up. Sometimes I've been at these fairs where it's really hard to hear students, don't understand what they're asking. So especially if there's lots of people talking, you want to slow down, you know, really be clear about what your questions are, what your intentions are. Don't have a closed mind. So you saw from the very beginning, and again, we'll bring up the slide again of all of the colleges that are going to be there. Don't show up and say, well, I've never heard of that school, so I'm not going to check it out. Especially in this process, you would be surprised how many students of mine have ended up at colleges that in the very beginning, they were like, no way, I would never consider a small school. I would never consider a school that far from home, or you know, whatever reasons they have. So don't go into this with a closed mind. Try to go in and just, you know, kind of take it all in. These are all options. And best case scenario, when you get to the spring of your senior year, you have many, many options, not just, you know, one or two. Last combine, don't let your parents do all the talking. So often what I tend to see is parents also get very excited about the process. They're the ones asking lots of questions. This is a time, if there are parents on this webinar, I would really advise you sit back. You really need to let your student, let your child do the talking. If they don't want to talk, you know, that's indicative. I think when I see the best success in terms of recruiting, in terms of, you know, where they, you know, are able to get support from coaches, it's from players that are actively engaged in this process. They're proactive. They want to talk to coaches. They want to email. They want a phone call. They're not letting mom or dad do this process for them. More coaches I've talked to this year have said, if I keep hearing from the parent, it actually is a warning sign to me. You know, I start thinking about, if I bring the student on board, am I really going to deal with overbearing mom or dad? So, you know, try as much as possible. Again, if you need to practice beforehand, have the student, have your child start doing all the talking instead of letting you do the talking. All right, we'll go to the next slide. All right, so good. We've got about 15 minutes left if we do have it. So any questions?
Hi, Karen. Sorry, I skipped over that resource slide. Do you want to cover the resources slide?
Oh, I was going to do questions first.
Okay, first. Okay. Sorry, did I?
So you can go back if you want. It does, yeah.
Okay. So I have a few questions. So first of all, from Ryan Tumulty, he'd like to know what is the competitive difference between varsity club and club?
Okay, so it's always hard when I can't really talk to someone. So I think the question is, what is the difference between like a varsity team versus a competitive team, I think.
He specifically means rugby in this case, and you know, it's a varsity club and a club.
Oh, okay. So I would say the biggest difference obviously is We'll see. Okay, so this is where it's going to be. It depends, because there are certainly some really competitive club teams. So a good example would be St. Mary's College in California. They're a club team and they're very, very successful. Another example would be Claremont Colleges. So they won the NSCRO National Championship. They're a club team. Club varsity teams, I think if you were to play for that team, you're expecting a little more dedication from all players. You are going to get some more support. So kind of just that administrative support. You'll have full-time coaches, or you'll have access to strength and conditioning coaches. So, I guess if I had to be general, varsity clubs will tend to be more competitive because, if you're going to put more money into a program, you're also probably going to recruit more kids that are serious, to build up the program, versus club teams. You're kind of just taking what you can, right? Sometimes it's a mix of students that are just walking on, guys that just show up that have never played. So it's maybe more of a mix of what that team looks like. So I don't know if that answers your question. If he wants to keep clarifying, I can certainly go back to that.
Sure. And then the next question is from Andrew White. And Andrew is wondering, how competitive is D1A?
Oh, good question. So how competitive is D1A? I think if you were to, for example, if you go to d1arugby.com right now, they have a top 20, top 25 list. So you can see all the teams that are currently kind of quote at the top, right? And what you'll tend to see for D1A, very recognizable names, right? So you'll have St. Mary's, Life, you'll have, see, I'm blanking on it, Indiana, Wisconsin, San Diego State. So historically, that top kind of bunch of D1A, like 2025, they're very competitive, right? They're very, very good. BYU, these are top level athletes. I think what you'll find is there's certainly going to be another level, like the next, 25 to 50, it's a pretty big difference. So, if you go, look at kind of the lower level D1A, they're certainly not going to be the same as the very top, the St. Mary's, Life, BYU, those sorts of teams. Overall, I would say if you're looking at a D1A program, the biggest things that I notice tend to be size. So overall size of the team, most of these teams carry bigger rosters. So anywhere from 2, 3, 4 full teams. And what I tend to see is obviously if you have more players that are competing for spots, week in, week out, that team's going to get better, right? You've got a bigger depth chart. You can say, look, you're fourth in line for scrum half. So you're going to have more guys competing, working harder for that versus some of your smaller teams. If you go D1 AA or Division II, you're not, you might have an A and a B side, but you're not going to have a third team really challenging for those top spots. So I think size of the team is one big thing you'll see in D1A. I also think just athletic, the actual size of the guys, right, or size of the girls. If we're talking about elite, you're going to have, the athletes, you're going to see that lock that is, 6'5", 6'6", that you would rarely see in, NSCRO, right? You're going to see those wingers that can run those, 4.6 40s, that's that sort of thing. So kind of bigger size, bigger athletes. So I think overall you're going to see more competition in D1A.
Excellent. Thanks, Karen. So I have a couple more questions.
Sure.
So from Susan McCrae would like to know, is there a list available for schools that can give admission support and or input? Or is that something stated on the college website, or can it be inferred?
Right. So what I would recommend in terms of figuring out, when it comes to whether or not they're able to apply official influence, those are really only going to come from a varsity team. So right off the bat, I think if that's what you're looking for, you're saying, I only need teams that can help my son or daughter get in. We're looking at just varsity teams. I think the input part is where it gets a little fuzzy. And, the reason I get asked this quite a bit, why don't I just have a big list? The reason I don't have a list is that it actually changes from year to year. So 2 years ago, one school was able to have input, and then the coach changed. That coach is now, somewhere else now, and the new coach doesn't have that same relationship with the athletics director or with admissions. So that has, obviously changed what that relationship looks like. So my recommendation would be, I would kind of, number one, kind of maybe step away from the rugby side of things, Make sure that the college list piece in terms of the academics, the atmosphere, the location, the size, the cost, all of those things, let's start there first. Then out of, maybe that smaller list, this is what I do with my players, I might start with just a list of 20. Out of those 20, we figure out which of those have support, whether officially with influence or just input. So I guess to quickly answer the question, no, I don't have a list of the input because that changes a lot more. But for the influence, it's certainly, available for varsity teams. Now, last piece I'm going to say, just because it's varsity doesn't mean they do have influence though. But just because you're varsity doesn't mean you have to have it. But if you're going to have influence, it will probably come from a varsity team. So hopefully that answers your question.
Excellent. Thank you, Karen. Here's a slightly different question from Nick Josos. Nick would like to know, how hard is it to start a club program at the college level?
Oh, good question. So typically to start a club program, I guess I would say it's not hard in terms of, most club programs, they're going to fall underneath the oversight of a school's, clubs and recreation and activities, things like that. And it's kind of like starting a club at your high school, right? So there is a bit of, you have to, put in an application. You have to, I'm assuming put in like a facilities request. You might have to have a faculty advisor. You need someone to kind of sign off on you starting a team. So that's kind of like the first thing, right? Is like, are we even able to have a team on this campus? Would we have a field, that sort of thing. So just kind of the nuts and bolts of having a team. I think once you have a school that says, yes, let's go ahead and start a club team, the next hurdle is then recruiting, right? So for most club programs that are on a campus, a lot of it is just recruiting people that are already at your school. And so you tend to see this at like a club carnival or like an activities day for freshmen where, you have tables and you're trying to encourage students to come join your team. I want to say, and don't quote me on this, and if you still have questions, the person that asked this, email me, because I want to say USA Rugby actually has a resource, like a starter kit for if you want to start a college program at your school. So they'll kind of walk you through the process of doing that. So hopefully that will help you. And Rich Cortez is in charge of the college division at USA Rugby. So he'd be a good person to ask as well if you can't get that resource.
All right. Thank you so much, Karen. I think Stevens Institute of Technology would be looking to start a club program next year.
Right.
Nick is one of my players, and that's where he's going.
Oh, great.
So that's it for all the questions that I have right now.
Okay.
Is there anything that you want to cover in summary before we leave?
Well, so I want to go back to the slideshow. I have just two more things to talk about.
Okay. No, fair enough. So you want to go back to the slides?
Yes.
Right, hang on one moment. That will take me a second. Sorry, I apologize. I actually closed your slideshow.
Just this light. So if we just go to that resources, it's like almost the end. It's like a flashback. Here we go. So the next, There you go. There we go. Okay, so briefly, I just want to talk about some resources. So the Rutgers Edge Playbook 2018 is available now. It's updated from previous years. So if you have a 2016 version or something, I do think it's worthwhile to go ahead and get a 2018 copy. I do have a promo code on there if you use Seminar 2018 for $10 off, so you can get that. It's a great place to start. I think if you're really just starting to think about college rugby, you're not really sure, the ins and outs. It basically will take what we've talked about a little bit tonight, but dive in more detail. It is set up like a workbook. So I do, recommend that students, when they get the book, they're actually going through each of the exercises. When I've seen the best results, it is from students that feel like they're a part of this process, that it's not like college happened to them. They were active, in deciding what kind of a college experience they want. And this is what the book is going to do. It's really geared to, set up a student to do the research and do the deep digging while they're in high school, so they don't just show up in college and say, oh, I don't even know why I'm here. I just picked this college out of a hat. So that is available online. It's under resources, actually, on the website, and you'll see playbook. So recommend you start there. I also really recommend the FISC Guide to Colleges 2018. It is a really comprehensive guidebook about many colleges, and kind of gives you a little bit more of that insider feel about what these colleges look like. Colleges That Change Lives by Lauren Pope, that's another great resource if you're looking at maybe looking at liberal arts colleges or colleges that are really looking for those hidden gems of students. St. Mary's College actually is in that list as well, so it's one of my favorite go-to books. I didn't spend a lot of time on testing, but I will just touch on it briefly. Do not, if you're a junior, do not go into one of these tests this spring blind. I hear that every single year, and it's probably one of my pet peeves is when a student says to me, oh yeah, I'm registered for the March SAT and I've never prepped, I'm just gonna take it. It's just such a waste of time. If you're gonna go ahead and take a standardized test that affects so much of whether or not you get into your choice college, you have to do some prep. So at least there's some free test prep available out there. Number2.com is a great ACT prep. And then Khan Academy has SAT prep. That's all free. Obviously, I'd recommend, if you talk to people within your own town and region, working with a prep tutor is worth it. There's many families, sometimes I've said, look, before I can even dive into this, you got to prep. We've got to get the test scores up because there's nothing I can do if those scores are too low. Really recommend, if you can, connect with us. We have a newsletter, Facebook and Twitter. If you can't find those links, feel free to email me. My email will be on the next slide, and let me help you. So we have a free 30-minute consultation offered for any family if you want to find out a little bit more about what we do. I'd love to hear about your family, see how I can help. That's my information right there. So info@ruggersedge.com. There's my phone number. Feel free to email me as well, and I can send you a copy of this PowerPoint. So, if you need to kind of refer back to some slides, I can make sure to get that to you as well. And I'll send it over to Pat too. So Pat, if you want to post it or something like that, we can make that available.
I'm one step ahead of you, Karen, and it's already been posted in the chat. And I'll make sure that I post it to the Facebook page later on tonight.
Great. So, I guess to wrap things up, I really appreciate your time. I know we try to cram a lot of stuff into an hour. So again, thank you for taking the time to find out more about rugby. Would love to get to know you, so please reach out. Pat, thanks as always for helping to organize all this. And I hope everyone has a great time at the New Jersey event. I know it's going to be a great one. And by the way, if you happen to forget to buy the book, they will be available at the Combine as well. So, there will be available, I want to say, at the check-in table. So if you want to buy them there and just walk home with it, it will be available at that time. So thanks again. And Pat, I don't know if you need to wrap up, but it's been great. Always fun.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Karen. I am just going to reiterate that the next important event or date for everybody is February 15th. And we'd appreciate if everybody registered by February 15th. And then the Combine, we know, is 10 days later on Sunday, February 25th, and it's in Morris County Vocational Tech. Karen, thank you so much for your expertise. I always learn a huge amount from these webinars, and I know all the parents and boys and girls do as well. So thank you very much indeed, and I'll look forward to the next time we have one of these webinars.
All right, wonderful. Thanks so much. Have a good night.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.